the United States military began the retake operation by maximizing the three-armed joint operation. They recaptured one island and then attacked adjacent islands in turn. An aircraft launched from an aircraft carrier destroyed the enemy base in advance, and then deployed an airborne force and launched an amphibious operation with Marines and infantrymen.
In addition, the aircraft carrier was prepared to advance, serving as a moving base loaded with all equipment and supplies.
Representing the Army, General MacArthur commanded the advance route from the northern coast of New Guinea to the Philippines.
For him, retaking the Philippines was an absolute goal to restore his honor. Meanwhile, Admiral Nimitz advanced from Hawaii to the Gilbert and Marshall Islands and the Mariana Islands in the Central Pacific Ocean. American aircraft carriers were as powerful as Japanese aircraft carriers in the early days of the war, and Japan, having lost its carriers, did little to attack. Japan used submarines to attack American warships, but to no avail.
On the other hand, the United States focused on attacking enemy cargo ships and tankers with submarines. In June 1944, when Nimitz's fleet attacked and occupied Saipan and Guam in the Mariana Islands, Japan had to admit defeat. Within the Japanese government, opinions began to emerge that reinforcement negotiations should be attempted, and the Tojo cabinet, which caused the Pacific War, was overthrown. The newly formed Koiso cabinet was forced to consider a two-way policy of promoting negotiations and strengthening the defense of the Philippines. A large-scale naval battle broke out in Leyte Bay in October 1944, as Japan mobilized all its naval forces to strengthen the Philippine defense. The Japanese army, which had already lost its offensive power, conducted the first kamikaze attack here, a suicide attack in which the pilot drove an airplane loaded with bombs and collided with a U.S. aircraft carrier or battleship. However, although such a reckless method may temporarily frighten the enemy, it could never be a means to victory. In January 1945, MacArthur's army landed on Luzon and by May had recaptured almost all of the Philippines. Meanwhile, the United States conducted the last amphibious operation in the Pacific War on Okinawa in April. The amphibious forces consisted of one Marine Corps and the U.S. Army's 24th Corps. The 24th Corps was the unit that later occupied the area south of the 38th parallel because of its proximity to the Korean Peninsula after the war was over. In Okinawa, Japan carried out a special kamikaze operation and made its last effort. The Japanese military forced the blind death by exaggerating the success of the kamikaze. In the kamikaze attack, 36 American ships were sunk and 368 were damaged. However, the Battle of Okinawa resulted in 13,000 and 110,000 American and Japanese casualties, respectively, and ended with the American victory in about 80 days. The bombing offensive on mainland Japan reached its climax when the US Air Force joined in air bombing from Okinawa, and finally, on August 6, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb in history on Hiroshima. Three days later, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki.
Finally, on August 10th, the Emperor of Japan delivered an unconditional surrender to the Allied forces and declared surrender 5 days later, ending the Pacific War after 5 years. Meanwhile, on August 8, 2 days after the first atomic bomb was dropped, Stalin declared war on Japan.
This declaration was not really intended to help the Allied forces' war effort, but rather an action taken after understanding Japan's intentions.
It was a highly political strategy to get the Americans to fight and get the spoils by intervening at the last minute.
Even in the final stage of Germany's defeat, Stalin pursued mainly political interests rather than military ones. It can be said that it was Stalin who was completely successful in ultimately achieving political ends through war. The Manhattan Plan and the Japanese surrender.
The Americans, who were fighting alone on the Pacific Front, slowly advanced northward. The Japanese army was scattered across numerous islands. Therefore, the US military adopted the island hopping operation, which selected major islands and captured them one by one, causing the remaining islands to spontaneously surrender due to lack of supplies. In this operation, American forces captured the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and the Gilbert Islands. In June 1944, American forces captured Saipan Island in the Mariana Islands, allowing B-29 bombers to bomb mainland Japan. From November 1944 onwards, large-scale air raids began on the Japanese mainland. Also, in October 1944, the US Army won a major victory in the Battle of Leyte Bay in the Philippines. This naval battle destroyed Japan's last major fleet. At the end of February 1945, US forces under General Douglas MacArthur occupied Manila. In addition, American forces captured the island of Iwo Jima in the Bonin Islands, only 500 miles from the Japanese mainland, making bombing the Japanese mainland easier. Meanwhile, on the US mainland, a dreadful new weapon known as the atomic bomb was being developed in secret. Development began in August 1938, just before World War II, when Albert Einstein sent a letter to Roosevelt pointing out the possibility of an atomic bomb. Fearing that Germany might build an atomic bomb first, the US government hastily pushed it forward with the Manhattan Project to develop nuclear weapons in 1940. The research was conducted in a tennis court below the University of Chicago football stadium to keep it secret. When the potential for success appeared, factories were built in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington. The bomb maker was Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer. In July 1945, an explosion test was conducted in the desert near Alamogordo, New Mexico.
The secrets of this plan were so closely guarded that even Vice President Truman had no idea until he became president. After much deliberation, the United States decided to use the atomic bomb in its war with Japan because it was expected that a war to occupy the Japanese mainland would last more than a year, resulting in the loss of more than 1 million Americans.
Finally, on August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on the industrial city of Hiroshima in Japan. On August 9, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan on August 8, just one day before.
On August 14th, the Emperor of Japan announced unconditional surrender, allowing the Soviet Union to become a victorious power against Japan virtually without fighting.
In early September, the Japanese delegation signed the surrender document on board the battleship Missouri, which was moored off the shores of Tokyo Bay. As a result, World War II, the greatest tragedy of mankind, came to an end. Thank you for watching the video, Fall of the Japanese Empire, the Pacific War Part 3, provided by History and Current Events. I'm Rebecca, Olivia, Abigail, Jody, Lydia, and Tony have contributed so far as narrators. Thank you.